morning everyone. In this video we're going to look at the product sum method again, but now we're going to make it a little bit harder, and basically we're going to do that by adding negative numbers, as you can see. So if you don't get the product sum method yet, watch part 1. In this video I'm assuming that you have already used it a little. So that means for our first example, I'm going to work with examples, that we have a product and a sum, and remember the product is always without a letter, which means that this over here is our sum. So we're looking for two numbers. When we multiply them we get 18, and if we add them we get 19. So which two numbers am I actually looking for? 18 and 1. Why? This is my, I will write down my checks over here. So 18 times 1, that's just 18, which is fine. And 18 plus 1 is 19. So these two numbers are the correct two numbers, which means, remember, there's like this standard form x something plus or minus something and x once again, in which we will fill these numbers in. In this case, both of these numbers are positive, so we get x plus 18 and x plus 1. Okay, the next one. In the next one, we have a sum of 7, and I also used a negative number as a product. So that means we have two numbers, and if we multiply them we'll get a negative number. That means that one of the two numbers that I'm using has to be negative. Why? Well, if we're using two positive numbers we'll always get a positive product, and if we're using two negative numbers that means our answer will also be positive. So we need one positive number and a negative one. And we want to find minus 18. Well, you can just do random things, but I know some of you like to do that, but that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to look at our sum, and then we're trying to be smart. This sum is positive, which means that I'm using two numbers. One of them is bigger than the other one, and the positive number has to be bigger than the negative number. Otherwise, this would have been a negative number. So, some things you might try are, for example, 6 times minus 3. That's minus 18. But the thing is, if you add 6 plus minus 3, the answer is just 3. So this is not correct. You cannot use these two numbers. Well, another way to find 18 is 9 times 2. Since the negative number has to be smaller than the positive number, it's 9 times minus 2. That's minus 18. And 9 plus minus 2, minus 7. Sorry, I'm lying. It's not minus 7, it's just 7. Which means that the first pair of brackets will contain x plus 9. That should make sense. But what happened to the second pair of brackets? Well, since we're using a negative number over here, this doesn't become x plus 2. You also don't like to write down x plus minus 2, because plus minus is the same as minus. So x plus 9, because 9 is positive, x minus 2. Next one. We have the same product. Am I not able to write my own handwriting? No, this should have actually been minus 7. Stupid me. Anyway, this is the product, this is the sum. So now we're even seeing two negative numbers. Does that complicate things a lot more? Well, no, actually it doesn't. It's the same thing that's going on over here, but the thing is, since our sum has to be negative, our product has to be negative. That still means that we need one positive number and a negative number. But the negative number has to be stronger than a positive one because the sum is negative. So, if I use the same two numbers I just did, 9 and 2, but instead of minus 2 I'm going to use 2, and instead of 9 I'm going to use minus 9. Then I have minus 9 times 2 is minus 18, and minus 9 plus 2 is minus 7. Which means that these are the two numbers that we're looking for. So our expression looks a lot like this one, but two symbols are swapped around. So we'll have x minus 9, because 9 is negative, x plus 2. The last one, in this case the sum is negative and the product is positive. How is that possible? Because two positive things multiplied give you something positive, but their sum is never negative. So how is this possible? Well, there's another way to find a positive product with two negative numbers. And if you add two negative numbers, you will get a negative sum as well. So we're looking at two negative numbers. I'm using these two, 9 and 2, but both negative. Then that's minus 9 times minus 2. Remember, negative times negative is something positive. Minus 9 plus minus 2 is minus 11. So these are the two numbers that I was looking for. So just to make sure, this has to be our product. This has to be our sum. So since I'm filling in two negative numbers, I'm going to fill in minus 9 and minus 2. That means in my brackets there will be two negative numbers. So x minus 9 and x minus 2. Well, hopefully you do get these examples. I want you to try and do these four by yourself, and then after you've paused the video and I did something to basically pass the time, you can we're going to discuss them. Well, my coffee cup is a disappointment, it's actually empty. The first one should have been an easy one, to be honest, by now. This is the product. This is the sum, which means that I need 2 and 8, because 8 times 2 is 16, 8 plus 2 is 10, which means 8 and 2 are the correct numbers. So I'm going to write down x plus 8 and x plus 2. The next one, instead of plus 16 I have minus 16, which means one of my numbers has to be negative. And I already see over here that basically the difference of those numbers has to be 6. Well, we just did the first one, and the difference between 8 and 2 is 6. So the biggest number has to be negative. So I'm going to try minus 8 times 2. It's minus 16, so that should work. Then minus 8 plus 2, it's minus 6, so that one works as well. So you can say that this is x minus 8. Should try x minus 8 and x plus 2. The next one, still minus 16, but now we have a really big sum, which basically tells me that one of the numbers has to be relatively big. So I'm going to try and use 16, because that's a really big number to get minus 16, times minus 1. That gives me minus 16, and then 16 plus minus 1 is 15. So I'm going to fill in 16 and minus 1. The next one, I want a product of minus 12 and a sum of minus 4. Let's start with something that's not correct. Let's try and use minus 4 times 3. That's minus 12. Well, that's fine, but the thing is, if we add these two numbers, the answer is minus 1, and we want minus 4, so this is not correct. Let's use minus 6, sorry, let's use 6 times minus 2. Then we will find minus 12. If we add them, we'll find 4, which is not minus 4, but we are getting closer. Usually when you have something like this, you can basically swap around the minus. So we're going to use minus 6 times 2, that's minus 12, and minus 6 plus 2 is minus 4. Which means that the correct two numbers are x minus 6 and x plus 2. Well, this has probably been a pretty long video, but hopefully you're starting to get the idea. Good luck with the homework.